Hey guys, what's up? This is Blue. Welcome to another installment of Humanized. Today I am here with my best friend of 22 years, artist and photojournalist Luis Antonio Thompson.
You got the full government.
The full government, so they can Google you.
Sheesh.
All right,
See
so
my mugshot.
today we are going to be doing something special. We're doing a two-parter, which means I'm holding you hostage. And the first episode that we're going to do, part one, is going to be around our childhood traumas. For those of you who don't know, most things that are wrong with you probably have something to do with your childhood. Antonio and I always make jokes when people are like, "You're so wise," and we're like, you have the trauma to thank for that.
That's right.
And so the question for today is, our essential question is, how much did our childhoods actually funk us up?
Never.
Really?
Perfect childhood.
Okay, that's not true. No one has a perfect childhood. One of the things I will say before we get started, though, is both of us had really amazing mothers who...
Yes.
Yes, we have really, but we grew up with we had really amazing mothers growing up, and they were very loving and affirming, abnormally so, actually. I think most of my self-esteem comes from how much my mother likes me. Because she used to be so obsessed with me. I was like, I must be popping if this lady is this obsessed with me. And
mine too.
Your mother's very much the same way.
Very
Antonio!
much. Antonio!
So my mother is from Haiti, and my dad's from Cuba, and his mom is from Honduras.
Hondureña.
Exactly.
Right.
And his dad is from Cape Verde?
Cabo Verde.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
There's a lot of accents happening in our families. Lots of accents with your mother yelling, Antonio!
Antonio!
It's probably burned into my brain. And I just realized that my middle name, Emanuela, Antonio and Emanuela, everybody thinks we're African American until they hear our middle names. Then they're like, there's something else in there.
That's funny.
All right, so let's get started right from the top, right? People are probably wondering, how have they been friends for what, 22 years?
22 years.
I know, as of Thanksgiving. People are wondering, how have we been friends for 22 years when we don't look any older than 25? I know.
Right.
We met at
Before
the
the
hospital.
womb.
Yes.
Yes.
We met before our parents conceived us. No, we met because of the alphabet.
Yes.
Such a basic bitch story.
Isn't that crazy though?
You say crazy, I say basic.
But you know how something as inconsequential as your last name.
The alphabet, yes.
And where you're seated in homeroom.
So, think about it. Oh, yes. Let me get started on the story.
Right?
So, should I look over here? All right. So, we have two cameras, guys, because we've already, leveled up, as you guys heard in my little preview. We are now on the teal couch, taking all this. And teal is a shade of blue. Branding. I'm always thinking about branding. No, but we were at the same school, Boston Latin Academy. We're from Boston, Massachusetts. Yes, there are people of color in Boston, Massachusetts. And I was Toulousma and he was Thompson. And that's how I met my best friend. That's cheers.
Cheers
what
to that.
Sexy story.
Look at that,
yeah,
right?
So he was the annoying little boy who was drawing pictures.
I actually don't think I was annoying. And
He was drawing the meanest cartoons.
I was sick.
Our teachers, you draw them with big breasts and huge asses. And their hair would be all crazy. What? You were like 12 or 13. You were a kid.
I think I was the model student.
Okay, Antonio does not understand. The premise of Humanized is not to be the Beyonce. I always joke and say he has the composure of Beyonce. You will never see Antonio sweat in public, and that's beautiful. But I need less Beyonce, more Rihanna. Okay, show them the you that I see. Yeah, behind the scenes. So yeah, people have seen my whole evolution, and so if I was going to do an episode on childhood trauma and how much my childhood might have affected me, you seem like the only person I could actually technically ask. I don't know anybody. I probably have 3 friends who have people that they've known as long as you and I have known each other. And there's something really amazing about that. When we met, I had a big fro and you had braces. The glow up is real. Thank God for that. Now, I was wondering, I think there's something about us that we take for granted.
What's that?
Couples who are in relationships, Valentine's Day was a couple weeks ago. Couples who are in relationships and they've been together for like 20 years. When their single friends talk about dating or how it sucks to be out there, they don't understand because they literally will never have to worry about this because they started their life with someone. A lot of times when people do things that are kind of whack or lame, and I'm like, oh, who are your friends? I realize it's because they don't have an Antonio. Like, we take for granted. Look at us. I know.
Look at that.
Are we really doing cheers with tea? Can you cheers with tea?
Yeah.
This is good tea, though. Hold on. Did we sip and you just sound like twins? This is kind of gross. Sorry, guys.
This is good.
Yeah, no, like,
some good tea.
People take for granted that whenever they are worried about being alone or whatever, I haven't had to worry about that since I was a kid because I always knew that even if the whole world hated me, I could still call you and, like, talk shit and laugh and kiki. So I think I take for granted how much a long-term person, having your person, isn't always just a romantic person. Sometimes your person is like your brother or your best friend or your dog. You know what I mean? So, like,
it's a blessing.
It is a blessing.
One way
like,
or another.
And people ask me, like, why aren't you more freaked out about being single? Like, Valentine's Day when it passed, I had a great Valentine's Day. I sent gas money to my cousins on the East Coast. That was their Valentine's. I took one of my friends out to dinner because he got some really great news about his career. You and I are going to the Sip and Paint at the end of the month.
Yes.
Shout out to I Am Muse. She's an amazing, amazing, amazing artist. And when I found out that she was doing the Sip and Paint in the LA area, I got VIP tickets for me and Antonio. So
VIP.
We will be seeing you on the 29th. It's a leap year.
Look at that.
How magical is that?
Yes.
So I take for granted that the reason why when I'm single it doesn't bother me as much is because I still know I have you. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of times we don't realize the folks that are our safety nets. And so one of the things I'm excited about us talking about is we write love letters to people that we have crushes on, but I think sometimes platonic love doesn't get enough attention.
This is right.
And one of the things I've noticed about you is you have a lot of really, even though I'm your best friend, you get that? I'm his best friend. Cheers.
Yes, you are.
Even though I'm your best friend, you have a lot of really good friendships, and you're really, really good at keeping in touch with people. I'm really bad at that. I'm getting better. So I guess my first question to you is, why are you so adamant about keeping so many of your childhood friends? Because you're the only childhood friend that I really still have, but you have like 4 or 5 of us that you've known since you were like this big.
Right.
And I'm wondering, do you think something in your childhood is what triggered you to be so intentional about your friendships? Because something in my childhood is what triggered me not to be intentional about my friendships.
I think that I growing up, I saw how my mother sort of always had friends and kept in touch with friends, and so I think it's just the way that I
socialized.
That's just the way that I was socialized. I feel like
you had a village around you.
I had a village around me, and my friends who I've had for years. I mean, we went through a lot of stuff together. Stuff that we saw that was like, when I think about how young we were to experience some of the things that we experienced, it's crazy. It was traumatizing. It was life changing.
Yeah.
And so you don't let those kind of friendships just go. And I think it's just my natural way. If I like you, oh cool, like, why don't you be part of my tribe? And
that's beautiful that you're saying that. And you also mentioned something that I didn't even think about until you said it. That concept of trauma bonding. A lot of people don't realize that trauma bonding really does happen. Yeah. Sometimes the ugliest moments of your life are what create your deepest friendships because you've survived something together.
Facts.
So, facts. Trauma bonding, I'm the opposite. When I was going through my biggest traumas in life, there was no one there. So,
damn.
I don't know what it's like to go through something like soul shattering and have someone to reach for. Because I was always going through those really big things alone, which is why while you're really good at having childhood friends, I'm not, because I don't know the concept of somebody else having my back as a child doesn't exist for me. I also think it's why I do the work that I do, right? Because when you're the kid who has to do everything on their own and figure out everything on their own, and you do pull it off, like you figure out how to survive, but then you see another kid flailing about, going through the same thing, but they're not figuring out the way that you did, your first reaction is to like pull something out of your tool bag and try to help them from what you've gone through. And so because I was always the kid who helped the other kids who couldn't figure it out, I think as an adult, that's what I still do.
Yes,
Like
absolutely.
I
what you still do.
literally just, whenever somebody's in trauma or in pain, I'm like, let me run around my tool bag and help you figure it out.
I do the same thing, and over the last couple of years, I've had to learn to sort of
put the cape away.
right, because if I have $100 and you need 105, it makes no sense for me to give you all I have and try to run around looking for the extra five. So
Yeah, and that's another thing too, is like,
that's also but learned behavior.
it's very learned behavior, which brings me to some of our questions, right? Now that we've already talked about, don't you look nervous? Why is everybody always so nervous? Let me say something about Humanized, right? The whole point is we're humanizing people.
Great.
And so there's nothing more beautiful.
Humanizing questions.
There's nothing more beautiful than like having conversations where you're not worried about saying what's right, you're just worried about saying what's authentic.
That's right.
So it is a safe space.
Yes, it is, of course.
But I
Of
feel
course.
like everybody's nervous and like, oh gosh, it's gonna make me
No,
cry.
no.
The first question I wanted to ask you, like for real, about
For real.
childhood and how they work, because that was all a warm up. Are you warmed up?
I'm warmed
Okay.
up. This tea is popping.
He is such a good actor. The tea is cold, but it's yummy. He's like, ooh, it's so warm. It's like iced tea. It's fine. Thank you for
all
pretending.
good.
So the first question I wanted to ask you about, like for real, was how would you describe your childhood?
I think I had a good childhood. I think I had a lot of love around me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was raised by. I feel like if the Golden Girls were
Afro-Latina?
four black women from Honduras,
Yes.
that was who I was raised by, and so
Thank you for being
all-
a friend. Ha-cha-cha.
all of the, you know, from my mom, I got the ability to empathize. From my
Which character is your mom if we were doing the Golden Girls?
my mom is Rose.
Your mother is
My mother's
Rose.
Rose, yeah.
Your mother is so
My
Rose.
mother's Rose.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, my mother's Rose.
Oh, hi, Leah. We love your mom.
Hi, mommy. Auntie Betty
Mm-hmm.
would be Blanche.
She's spicy.
Auntie Betty.
Auntie
is
Betty's
Blanche.
always been the one whose stories I enjoy the most.
Auntie Betty
Betty's
is
living her life.
Yes. Auntie Tina is Dorothy.
She is.
Yes.
She cares so much.
But she grounds.
She grounds
everyone.
everybody.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Tina was like an aunt to me just from being around her.
And my granny was Sophia, of course.
Of course.
You know,
And she does have
and
those
still
one-liners.
is, and she has all the one-liners. Yeah.
Your mother is very, oh my
But
God.
like when you think about being raised in
You
that
need
kind
to
of
write
environment, you know, it's somewhere. It's.
if they do an all-black version of that show,
Yes, I
You're-
already see the vision for it. Actually, I have
I totally see it.
yeah,
So you would say you had a good childhood, right?
a great
So
childhood.
here's the thing, though. Whenever
yes.
we describe our childhoods, though, I've noticed
Mhm.
that people always feel the need to say good or bad, but nothing in between.
Mhm.
So if you took away the extreme shades of good or bad, what descriptors would you use for your child? 3 descriptors to describe your childhood.
Family, like family. Is that a descriptor?
Mm-mm.
No, it's not.
It's a
Okay.
noun.
But the essence of family.
Okay.
So what would you call that? I mean, loving. I would say loving.
Okay.
I would say supportive.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes isolating.
That's a very honest answer.
I mean, but you know, it was all of those things.
Yeah, I would think if I was going to describe my childhood honestly in 3 words,
How would you describe your childhood in 3 words?
my childhood feels like an origin story. It was so dramatic. Like, you've heard some of my stories. You've heard most of my stories. Like, the first 3 years of my life could have been a Netflix film. So that's a problem.
You gotta write that.
I'm going to write it down. Netflix, holla at your girl. But no, I would say dramatic. My life started off so dramatic. My mother was in a small village in Haiti, and there was this Cuban guy who owned a lot of property in the area. And he had a huge house. This was almost like imagine like a plantation in Louisiana. There was a huge big house where the Haitian Germans lived. It was this family that was half Haitian, half German. And then in the back house was like just the regular Haitian family, poor, like servants' quarters. And his daughter, who basically was like a light-skinned version of me, she looked just like me, same build and everything, but she was like 6 feet tall and very bright-skinned. And she used to walk around like collecting rent from everybody. And my mother was like, one day this big caramel bitch just came knocking on my door, like, where's the rent? And I was like, oh no, I ain't got it. And so she didn't answer the door. And she had never not answered the door before, but her family was going through a rough patch. And so they hid until she left, and they were like, oh, thank God. The next week, my dad showed up because his daughter was like, they're not paying their rent. And my dad knocked on the door, and she was like, you guys, this is how it ends. And she opened the door, and he took one look at her, and she never had to pay rent again. And he built
That's
a
how you
house.
do it.
Right, he built her a house. Yeah, my mother was finessing. Okay, he built her a house. He moved her in. The family never had to worry about money. They never had to worry about anything. And she's living in this big beautiful house built by her boyfriend. And she gets pregnant with me, and he begs her to have an abortion. And she's like, no, I'm like in my 30s. I'm not gonna have an abortion. And so she goes through the pregnancy, and in her last trimester, his wife comes knocking on the door.
Wow.
And that origin story was always interesting to me because
Wow.
from the time my mother found out that she was a mistress and she didn't know, to the time that we went from Haiti to Cuba and then to Boston, of all places, a lot of things happened in those first 3 years of my life. Like a lot of things. And so dramatic, it's the reason why I'm probably a writer. I would also say disconnected because I feel like I had two childhoods at the same time. I think there's one childhood when my mother comes back into the country and she's loving on me and spoiling me and sending me to private schools and sending me to Latin Academy where I met you and giving me the best of everything to the point where people are like, God, your mother is the most loving person in the world. And then the other half of my childhood is all the stuff that happened in the 7 years before she and I got reunited. And all the trauma that caused, and all the anger that caused, and all the anger that I carried because of it. So it's weird. I had two childhoods at the same time. And I think that's why my brain is always two-pronged, because I had to live in two worlds at the same time. I think a lot of people have to do that. They have to live in several different worlds. And when you look back, we realize that our parents were just people.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt.
We're the ages now that our moms were when they already had us. And now all the stuff that I'm judging my mother for, I was like, lady, you did your best.
Yeah.
Because I would drop a baby right now. Like
life will humble you and remove,
right.
if you let it.
But even our
strip
fathers,
all the judgment.
I will say we have much more painful narratives around our fathers. But even when we think about how we judged our fathers, thinking about a man at my father's age now, or a man at your father's age now, it's almost like, okay, you could have done that better. But I could also see I have friends who have messed up the way that you have, and I turned you into like this villain. So I'm gonna ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, and you have to be honest. Beyonce.
All right, cool.
Less Beyonce, more Rihanna.
Okay.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how healthy was your childhood in totality?
In totality, my childhood was a 7.
7. Healthy
I think
at
a 7. I mean, that's like a C minus.
That's good. That's passing.
Is that good? Is it?
I mean, it's not awesome, but it's passing.
I mean, I think it was good.
Yeah. I think it's normal. I think rather than saying good or bad because that's subjective, I think a 7 is a normal childhood.
Yeah, I had a normal childhood.
Yeah, mine was like a 5.
I feel like we have to unpack that.
Right.
I feel like, but like you, I think of my childhood in two
skewed ways. Yeah.
Because I feel like my cousin was murdered when I was young, and I was a teenager. I was 13, and when I think about, everything changed after that time. Yeah. But still somehow it didn't ruin everything, but it changed everything. It certainly made a lot of things different. But I don't think, even though that was such a pivotal moment in my life, I don't look at it as the thing that, caused my childhood to be, like doomed. But
it's interesting that right now in particular, and people can Google this because Antonio's aunt, Clementina Cherry, is like a huge
She's incredible.
activist.
It's my auntie.
We love her.
We love her. She's the best.
We love her so much. And because she built the Peace Institute.
So she started a nonprofit in the name of her son who was murdered. And
your cousin
has done great work.
That's amazing that your cousin is murdered. Not like in a car accident, but he's murdered.
He's shot in the head.
And now, mind you, if you guys Google this, because Clementina Cherry is a bigger deal than we even want to talk about right now because we love her so much. But if you Google it, like, he's murdered by did they figure out who it was? Is there officially in it? Because the journalist in me doesn't want to say who, but do they think it's someone who in the area? Who do they officially think it was?
The person who served a sentence for it is who's now out. I mean,
we don't have to say his name for legal reasons.
But I mean, there's always a question, right?
Right. And I remember when we were kids, I heard a rumor that it was a cop's son.
The person who
Was convicted was a cop's son.
was a cop's son.
Now think about this, right? This is happening a long time ago. This is happening almost 20 years ago, right? Now more than 20 years ago. Over 20 years ago. So 20 years ago when this happens, like this was before Trayvon Martin. This was before all of that. So think about back then the trauma of having to deal with your son being murdered and how relevant that story is now, right? Like we're acting like Black Lives Matter and all the things that Tamir Rice and all those things have happened are something new, but your family went through this 2 decades ago.
Yeah.
And we've seen with social media how much losing a young, promising, handsome, I saw the pictures, he's very handsome Black boy, like in his prime, that is going to shift the family. That is going to shift.
It changes
everybody.
Everything. Changes everything.
What do you think that taught you? Because there's probably somebody right now who has a 14-year-old who's scared about having to deal with that in their own families. So it's a really relevant question. What did that teach you in retrospect 20 years later about life, like losing him so young?
It taught me the importance of not losing myself, because when I see things like this happen, now social media, when we see killings and we can actually see the act, on Twitter, my heart first thing jumps to, oh God, that's another family who is going to have to navigate what is essentially hell, right? Like you have this now big gaping hole in your family. How do you actually recover from that? You don't. No one ever recovers from it. And so I feel like it forced me to find ways to be empathetic in places where there's a lot of trauma.
You are very empathetic. I will give you lots of credit for that.
But in places where there's a lot of trauma, my natural instinct is, how can we help? And I think that's because that's our family, without having any guidance.
No guidance.
Had to figure that out on our own. How do we actually survive now? How do we walk how do I walk the streets that I grew up on, right? How do I walk to the train station where I'm stepping over the pavement that my cousin took his last breath?
Right.
And that's like every day, going home, going to work, going to school. Right. And so
and a lot of kids go through that.
And everybody's going through it.
Everybody's going through
Everybody
it right
is. And so, but it also taught me, I looked at how some people around me, how they reacted. They got into a lot of stuff. They got into a lot of drugs. They got into, a lot of violent stuff. I mean, their lives look different than mine.
Right.
But I also understand that that's a very real reaction to going through something like that so young, where kids are just getting shot, kids are getting killed every day in the neighborhood. It becomes normalized. And so we don't realize how, over time, it numbs us. And I didn't want that to happen to me. But I didn't make a decision that young that, I'm not going to let this, numb me.
Someone would say somewhere quiet inside of you did, though. You just didn't give yourself credit for it.
Yeah, I do think
you did. I
think there are times now where I think, okay, I'm a huge therapy enthusiast.
Yes, we love therapy.
we love therapy.
It's either pain or purpose.
Yes.
You know what's interesting? You said desensitized, and I always find it interesting that when trauma happens, we're talking about how childhood trauma affects you. You can either let it desensitize you, or you can allow it to tenderize you.
It did both, though.
Yeah.
It did both.
I think for me, I had times where it was all one or the other. I think when we were in high school, I was a very angry kid. The police showed up several times on my behalf. They never took me, though, because my mouth was so big, they didn't want me in the squad car.
Yes.
So the cops got called on me a lot. Mind you, I was never violent, guys. I never had the police called on me because I was violent. My mouth was just so vicious. They were like, yo, can someone call the police to get her out of here?
Yes.
You know how crazy you have to talk to people to call the police on your mouth?
And that's
like no weapons.
That's not happening today, right?
No, I'm a
nice
person.
Okay, that's right.
Until you was my best friend. No, back in the day, I was an angry child because I had all this unresolved pain in my heart. And so it came out in church. So I was the super evangelical,
Wait, actual church?
Yeah, I went to in high school. There was a time where, the first couple years that you and I knew each other, we were not super close. We knew each other, we were friends, but we were not close. And then around the 4-year mark or something, we became really, really close. And so for those first couple of years, I was looking for purpose. And so what I would do is I would go to different churches. And I'd be like, yo, somebody's God's going to fix this. So I went to Seventh-day Adventist Church. It's very strict. I went
Yes.
to the big old evangelical churches like the mega warehouse churches where everybody's like trying to find a husband and Jesus at the same time. I've been to those. I've been to a couple of churches where I think it might have been cults. Some of them are questionable. Like I tried out everything. I even tried out like going to people who were chanting. I didn't know what they were doing back then. Now I realized it was Buddhism. And I was like, well, this feels good, which is why me and Buddhism have this love affair even now still, because the chanting really does help you with your body and your mind and all that stuff. But yeah, I tried out like I think 12 different churches in high
Wow.
school because I thought God could fix
Wow.
everything. And I was so convinced that God could fix everything, and I still believe that God could fix a lot, that I ended up becoming a zealot. Like I was a Bible thumper. Like I was super judgy. I was the Christian that other Christians talk crap about. And so because I was so evangelical, I was using like church as an escape from me. I probably just needed therapy, to be honest. And it made me very judgmental. And Antonio knew me back then. And here's the thing, right? I have strong opinions now, but I mind my business. Back then, I was minding everybody else's business.
Big facts.
And so it was interesting for me to see how you went from being the kid drawing those mean cartoons. You don't want to fess to it because those cartoons, you were talking about dragging. Yo, and so you could draw one cartoon focusing on the 3 things that you thought you hid that morning.
You know what?
We gotta keep it real. We gotta keep it real. So, but here's the thing, though. What I learned from Obi last week's episode, it's called visual acuity. The reason why you were able to do such soul crushing portraits is because your visual acuity. But you know what the funny thing is? The reason why I want people to know this about is that I used to be a rage addict and that you were the king of all dragging people is because look how we've evolved into, right?
Yes.
Like sometimes that mean kid, sometimes the kid that's drawing the picture.
I don't think I was a mean kid.
I'm giving examples.
Oh, okay.
But sometimes that I was mean. Sometimes that mean kid who is like judging the stuff out of people and using God or Jesus or rules as an excuse to like just be inhumane, or the kid who's doing like the comical like satire of folks, those kids are probably like trying to work in their minds through some pain, some unresolved pain.
That's usually the
Why,
case. Yeah.
Actually, that's usually the case.
Yeah.
And a lot of those kids become creatives because that same you that had to draw out what you were seeing because you were blocking out some really traumatic stuff, like you lost your best friend, you know what I mean? And me having to deal with all the stuff that happened in my life, it came out as me needing order. I was being super judgmental because I needed order, because I was scared that if I didn't have order, then my whole world would come falling apart. If I was imperfect, my whole world would come falling apart. And you were trying to find like an escape through laughter. But now you do these amazing portraits where those same streets that you talk about where gritty things happen, you travel all over the world and take like amazing portraits of people living in the same community that you lived in, but like in different parts of the diaspora. And I guess for me, one of my questions for you is like, do you wish that you had traveled more as a child?
Oh, yeah.
Because it feels like when you became a photojournalist and you started going to Africa and you started going to all these different places on the continent and you went to, gosh, you went to Thailand. Where else did you go to? You went to a lot of places. You're trying to go to Vietnam. Antonio's trying to convince me to go with him to Vietnam, but that's just, you know.
It's cool stuff there.
It is cool stuff. I'd just rather go back to Amsterdam, to be honest. But yeah, no, like how much do you think your childhood affects your art and the way that you create? Because you like gritty stuff. If you went to Brazil, you would go to a favela. You wouldn't go to a resort.
I want to go to a favela.
Of course you do, yeah.
I think everything about how I approach my work, my art, all goes back to, I'll say this, you know, when I was ordering Chinese food when I was young. It was after my cousin was murdered.
Right.
And I called up and said, hey, do you deliver here? And they were like, no, we don't deliver there. And I said, well, why not? Oh, we're scared to go to that part of town. And now, mind you, this was a place, this wasn't that far, but it was on the sort of other side of Dorchester Ave, if you will.
Right.
Where, you know, if you did cross this line, okay, you're kind of sort of getting into territory that people would consider dangerous. And I never forgot that feeling. I just wanted to order food. This was a restaurant in my own community. They refused to deliver. And so I feel like I hear, now there's a project that I'm working on that is focused on a particular community that a lot of people consider, downtrodden or
Skid
dangerous.
Row.
Skid Row.
Antonio's
And
really passionate. For those of you in the LA area, Antonio's really passionate about capturing the stories of people in that community.
and Skid Row is my favorite neighborhood. I love it.
Nobody would ever think that Skid Row would be someone's favorite area, but you love that community.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm shown so much love. I go there. But to get back to your question, because I can go way over
But
there.
it feeds into it. The reason why you care about the homeless community, the reason why you care about if you go to Brazil, you want to go to favela, not a resort, is because you were in those same areas in Boston, and you know what it's like to be judged in that way.
Exactly. I remember a friend that we had in high school saying, "You live where?" "Oh, that's the ghetto." And I feel like
I used to be scared of that neighborhood until we became super close.
But
and remember one time, let's keep it 100. Like people think Boston is really like white and like you could just eat off the floor and da da da. No, Boston has some places.
Boston has.
But Antonio humanized his area for me because I used to be scared of going there because I used to live in that same area.
Humanized.
Yeah, but I remember one time my aunt and I were walking on the street and someone just grabbed my favorite chain off my neck. I thought, "That's my favorite chain." And he said, "It's mine now, bitch." And I was like, "I'm 5." But I'm 5. It was like my birthday chain. So I know like that area used to scare me. But like because I had to come visit you, I was like, I'm gonna have to get over it if I have to see him. But one time we were on the phone and you were like, I think there's a dead body in the backyard.
I do remember that.
Was that a real dead body in the backyard?
There was someone had gotten shot a couple of blocks over.
Oh my God.
And had run like through the bushes and ended up in our backyard. It was crazy. You know what?
And I'm on the phone in a much less.
Yeah.
And I'm on the phone like, Antonio, there's a wet in your backyard.
But this is not to paint a picture.
No, but trust me.
But you know what I'm
we
saying?
have
like
love for the hood, but we have to talk about like the real thing about how poverty or lower income communities, how they get dismissed, right?
Yes.
And so like when I think of someone who can say, "Wow, there's a dead body in my backyard," I'm like, "Oh my God, that's so scary." Until you realize my best friend lives on that block, and his family lives on that block, and all these good people who I go to school with live on that block. And suddenly bringing it back to humanizing it, we're like, an area being violent doesn't negate that there's still people with like heartbeats,
and
lives and lived experiences who are still in that same area. So like, how do you reconcile those two realities? Like, it's always been interesting to me when I think of Nipsey Hussle and how he loved his area until the day that he died. You know what I mean? And I see so much of that in like your work. Like I think no matter how rich you get, I'm gonna always find you
on the train
in somebody's hood.
I'm on the train, going to some spot to eat the best food. You know, because that just because a place is painted as this awful thing, doesn't mean that there's beauty there. And I think that's kind of what guides me. Is there's beauty in everything. There's beauty everywhere. There's beauty in every place. And so I'm not going to allow a thing that happened to color my opinion about any place.
That's so
in this
sweet.
world.
So
but you know what I'm saying?
Person.
But I mean, it's but it's survival though.
It is
because
survival.
if I didn't feel that way, then I would
be rocking back and forth in the corner.
I would be, I'd be as good as dead. And
now
I don't
the next question is a perfect segue. Most people don't make it out of their adolescence without some sort of self-limiting narrative or belief. Be honest. By the time you were 19 turning 20, what self-limiting narrative or belief were you harboring? And these are questions that I want the audience to please ask themselves. Like by the time you ended your teens, what self-limiting belief had you already started telling yourself about yourself?
That was a very specific time in my life. And so, I mean, I think by that time, I had, I don't even know how to answer that. But I don't think I saw,
what did you believe about yourself at that time?
I could not visualize success for myself.
Wow, that's major.
Yeah, I could not visualize getting past a certain roadblock.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, and it also...
So you're having a crisis of faith.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Even, when I think about even conversations that I had with my dean in college, where he said, and he was someone that I knew growing up. He was actually a mentor of mine. And he said, he would always bring it back to what happened to my cousin and said, you don't realize that such a sudden, violent end to a life has impacted you and how you're able to see beyond that. You know, and I think about that a lot lately, even when I'm now challenging or trying to, this is therapy, shout out to my therapist, when I'm trying to challenge the things that are going on in here, I think about, okay, is this a moment where I am, is what I'm seeing challenging me because it's a challenging thing, or is what I'm seeing challenging me because I've programmed myself?
Triggered in some way.
You know what I'm saying? And so I think when I was 19, 20, you know, there's no way, you're not really having those conversations with yourself. You're not checking in and saying, oh, am I, you know what I mean?
I feel so envious of people, Generation X now, not Generation X, what is it, Z? We're on Z, right? Generation Z, the people who are like under 25. I envy the fact that they have so much language now that we didn't have back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things I will say is that, you know how they have those jelly cakes when you are eating a dessert? Hold on, let me just get this out. Yeah. A jelly cake is like a cake where it's all cake and then there's like a jelly coloring swirled in it. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
So I used to think of myself like a jelly cake where I was the cake and the red swirl was everything that was wrong with me. And so in my mind, no matter how much you cut through me, you were always going to find something wrong. I thought I was just like deeply and like irreconcilably like damaged. And so because I walked around feeling like I was damaged, I always looked at everything as, how do I fix me? How do I fix this? I was always trying to fix things. And I remember being like 27. It took that long. When I was 27, and for anybody who's in their 30s, you know that when you hit 27, 28, that's where you start to get rocked by life a little bit. You're starting to return. And so when I was 27, I remember I was watching something on like an old Oprah rerun. And it was like this old episode, and it was somebody who was like rich and famous, some A-list star. And I'm sitting there watching them complain, and I'm realizing this person looks perfect based on society's standards, is rich and famous based on society's standards, has everything that society should say that she should want, and her complaints are the exact same complaints I had that day.
Facts.
And I was like, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. We're all like this.
Right.
Like it was something about seeing someone with the perfect life, like have that moment and realizing that even with the perfect life, you're still a human being.
Isn't that amazing when you have that moment that's like, there's
nothing wrong with me.
It literally.
At least there's nothing wrong with me more than anybody else on the planet.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm no longer that fucked up swirly. I need to find what that cake is called. One day I'm gonna find that cake and just eat it out of spite. So your self-limiting beliefs and mine have been a topic of a lot of our conversations in the past. We're constantly rewriting our scripts. I want to ask you a question.
Yeah,
Would you
ask me a
say
question.
Your family had healthy coping mechanisms when you were growing up?
No.
I don't think my family. We all have anxiety issues.
No.
Everybody in my family has an anxiety disorder. So like we're all very anxious people. How do you think?
Like I'm anxious right now. Can
yes.
you see? Like fidgety.
But what do you think? If you could go back and look and have current, you go back and talk to your parents and your family and everybody around you. What advice would you have given your mom and your aunts and people in your family about how to cope better with what you saw them going through? Because you have all these years of therapy and hindsight.
If I could talk to them, like knowing what I know now, I would probably tell my mom to just like lighten up on herself. Let me tell you, my mother is the most incredible human being on the face of this earth. But yet she judges herself so harshly. You know, she sort of was always running a marathon trying to provide. I probably would have told her, give that, and I tell her that now, like, give that to yourself, like, chill out. You know what I mean? Like, oh no, papi, I gotta cook. No, don't, chill out, like, relax.
You sound just like
But
her.
you know what I'm saying? But it's like, cool, you know, relax. I would have probably hit that a lot more with her. Probably same thing for my grandmother. My grandmother, you know, she had a hard life, you know, growing up in Honduras as a black woman in a Latin American country. I mean, we talk about racism here,
Y'all know nothing about racism until you see Latin
oof,
American
I
racism.
tell you,
That
you
is
know,
grade A, uncut. We're still
and
pre-civil rights movement in Latin America when it
and
comes to racism.
and if you know, you talk to her and you could taste the poverty, you know what I mean? And so I think that's still,
It never leaves you.
it never ever, and I don't think it will ever leave my grandmother, because she talks about it. You can hear it, you can feel it, you can taste it, you can sense it. Like it colors everything, you know. But it also made her work hard, and
Right.
I would have probably told her, look at where you were, where you came from. Look at what you have now. Look at what you've built for our family. Chill out, relax. It's cool.
What would you say to you in your 30s now? What would you say to you in your teens?
Me in my 30s now,
I remember you in your teens.
probably I would say the same thing.
Chill out.
Chill out.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's cool. You know.
Yeah.
Chill out. You know, to Antonio as a teen, I probably would, you know, have colored it a little more. You know what I mean? Because, but also actually, no, I would say the same thing. Chill out and fuck what they think. It doesn't really matter.
Fuck what they think.
Fuck what they think
That
is a
right
whole.
there, let me
That's
tell
a mood
you,
for.
If me at 15 had even a tenth of the self-esteem that I have now, it would be over. You know what I'm saying? Oh my God, I wish I could go back liking myself as much as I do now. Now, like, direct question. How much do you think us not having our fathers around affected us? Because our moms could love us till they're blue in the face. They're still one person. And I think a lot of times, because of our loyalties to our moms, we don't want to talk about what the absence of our dads, how that might have impacted us. But there's like, you know, shame the devil, right? Like, get it out. For me, I think not having my dad around is the reason why I'm so good with men now as far as conversation. Because when my dad and my mom broke up and I saw my dad for the last time, my dad and my mom were arguing about something. And he said something hurtful to her, and she said something hurtful to him. But you know the male ego can be very fragile. And my father had a very fragile Latin ego. And so because she said something crazy back to him, he was like, F this, I'm out. And so I was like, so if you don't know how to talk to him and he just leaves you, like, that's kind of messed up.
Wow.
But the funny thing is, though, because I was so cognizant of masculine fragility, at first it was me coddling men where I was talking to them nice. So I got guys to like me by talking to them nice, but I wasn't holding them accountable. But then when I started learning about emotional intelligence and how, no, if I love you, I have to hold you accountable, I started learning how to finesse holding men accountable while still not robbing them of their masculinity. That took me years. But it's the reason why when I moved to LA, this land of beautiful, successful, ambitious men, it was very easy for me to make friends with alpha males because I had spent so much time of my life figuring out how to keep an alpha male in the room in the way that my mom hadn't been able to keep my dad in the room. And I was like, God, I got all that from watching my mother and my father argue. So even something like watching your mother and your father have that last argument before he storms out, it creates this wiring in your brain about, well, how do I stop myself from reliving this? But here's the joke though, like we end up reliving so many things from our parents. So for you, what do you think your dad, how do you think it impacted you not having him around?
I think, well, first, growing up, it didn't matter growing up in a weird way. Like,
because your norm was having the Golden
I never
Girls.
had, and so I never felt a lack of anything. I never wanted for anything. There was never a moment when I was very young. There was one moment. I mean, I always say I have one memory of my pops from growing up, and it wasn't a very good one. But even that, I never felt like I was missing anything. It wasn't until.
But you had other male figures in your life as well.
I did.
You had lots of uncles and cousins. Like you
Yes.
were not.
Right. I was
you
not.
had a
My
lot
family.
of men around
like,
you.
yes. And so I don't feel like I lacked anything.
Right.
I do now as an adult. I do question like my approach to relationships. You know what I'm saying? We're all works in progress. I'm a work in progress. But I do sometimes wonder
when it comes to dating and relationships and intimacy.
Like, is that something
that's 100%. Here's the thing that's crazy is even when your parents figure out a way to, like if you're missing a father or a mother, they figure out a way to supplement for that. It always tends to come out when it comes to your love life, which is why I would say until you've seen someone dating, you don't really know them. You can know
Mhm.
somebody for 20 years. Until you see them in a relationship, you don't really know who they are.
Mhm.
And so that actually brings me to an interesting topic of fault versus responsibility, right?
Mhm.
Like, it's not our fault that things happen in our childhoods that adversely impact us, like a fear of intimacy or learning how to, like, build healthy coping mechanisms. But it is our responsibility,
Mhm.
though, to
Mhm.
address it so that we don't carry it into the future. So I wanted to ask you, second to last question, is there something that you can identify that wasn't your fault but is your responsibility? Like, for me, it's not my fault that my family didn't give me the tools to know how to do self-care, but it is my responsibility to create a healthy life for myself and to go out and learn things on my own that they couldn't give me, right?
Mhm.
So is there something where you can say it's not my fault but it is my responsibility?
I would actually piggyback off of that, not to be unoriginal, but no, but you know what I mean. I do feel like um, growing up, I saw what it was to
Right,
give, but never to yourself.
right,
And so I will say that this chapter of my life is really about pouring back into myself. I do think that, you know, we, as we get older, we think about all of the things that have happened to us. And oh my God, I can't believe that that happened. And it can be very easy to become judgmental and harsh to our loved
right,
ones, but it's not their fault either. My grandmother had to survive. And so she had a very specific mentality. My mother and my aunts didn't grow up with her because my grandmother had to leave the country so young, when they were very young, in order to provide a life for them. And so they were trying to figure out how to survive without their mother. So you think
we're
about
all just trying to
we're
figure it
all just trying to
out.
figure it out.
We always, this is the thing that I cannot stand when we tell stories about our lives. And by the way, if there's a bunch of stories that you've been addicted to telling for a long time, I always say it's time to get new ones. Um, we always do good guys and bad guys, but when you
Right.
really step back, it's just a bunch of humans doing human shit.
Yep, that's it.
There's very few people who walk around with a Hitler in their life or with a knight in shining armor on the other extreme. Like, it's usually just people who are somewhere in the middle, like doing the best that they can, right? My last question for you before we pivot is: do you want kids? Antonio, focus.
I'm focused, yes.
Do you want kids? And if so, what kind of parent do you think you would be?
I do want kids.
You do want kids?
I think one.
You just
I
want?
want
Yeah,
one,
I think I want twins. I just want like a 2 for buy one get one free, like a BOGO. I would like to have twins. Yeah.
I want, right now, my amazing little nephew. So he's good for me right now.
What kind of parent do you think you'd be?
I would be 100,000,000% involved.
Okay, you'd be
but
very
without
involved father.
very involved. But also, I want my son, I want my daughter to experience life
Right.
without my interference.
Really? You think
Go
you're gonna
out-
pull that off?
Yeah, I want. You know what? 5 years old, go walk down Skid Row.
Whoa, whoa, whoa!
I'm just
Okay,
kidding.
wait,
No.
wait. You
No,
did not mean
no,
that.
but I mean,
they want to
but-
report you now.
No, but because I think after the murder of my cousin,
Right.
I was shielded from so much. I think that's also partly why I go into different places.
Why are you so
because
wild? Because you were sheltered.
it's because there are things that I need to see.
Yeah.
I don't ever want to deprive my child of the ability to see things, good, bad, or not.
Right.
You know what I mean? I want my child to be able to see the world, draw his or her own conclusions. But I will always be there. I'll be supportive. I know that's the kind of father. But that's why. But I also.
I know. I'm just gonna say.
Uh-huh.
Let me get this out.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
you'll be the kind of father where me and your kid are gonna have to have a close relationship. So that when they're like, Auntie Blue, he's doing it again. I'm
What's
like,
it?
Antonio,
What's
did
it?
you go to that room? Look, it's my house.
I didn't.
Antonio.
I wouldn't do that.
Yes, you would,
I
Antonio.
wouldn't do that. No.
Okay. Before we go,
But I wouldn't. do
Antonio,
that.
you are a helicopter
I wouldn't do that,
dad.
but that's also because
You're a helicopter dad to me, and we're
When-
only 3 weeks apart. So
when-
Antonio and I are only 3 weeks apart, but he thinks he's my father.
when
Really?
I was growing up, I remember my mother looking at comic strips that I thought were garbage that I was like drawing, and I just remember feeling violated. Like I didn't want anybody to see that. So for that,
you
I
are
wouldn't.
gonna respect privacy.
Yeah, of course.
I want you.
That's
to
my middle name.
Say it to the camera that you're gonna respect your kid's privacy.
Respect privacy is my middle name. Thank
So-
you very
so
much.
years from now-
Respect privacy is my middle name.
Okay, so years from now, when I
Years
get a
from
call
now.
from my niece or my nephew, that you have a shotgun and they're watching their boyfriend roll up in front of the house for prom.
I don't have a gun.
I'll be able to play this back and say that you said that you want to respect your kids' privacy.
Absolutely, of course.
Okay, so Antonio, I'm gonna have you actually sit right there. We are going to actually do a part 2 with Antonio, where now we're gonna. You're so excited. Part 2 of this is gonna be. We've already talked about our childhoods and how much they may or may not have impacted us. We kept it really positive, but let's be honest, a lot of times the worst things that happen to you create the best parts of you. Part 2 is now going to be about privacy and how we think that what we've gone through in our past has impacted us being very discreet in what one would arguably call a very TMI culture.
Very TMI
Everybody
culture.
shares too much of their business, and
Everybody
we have
shares
the
everything.
very opposite problem.
Yes.
All right, so you guys please tune in next time for part 2 of this interview with my hyperactive best friend Antonio.
On Humanized.
He's so proud. I'm so embarrassed. Till next time, thanks guys for watching.